Madam Speaker.
Fantastic.
Parliament is more than procedure. It is the custodian of the nation's freedom. Those words were spoken by the great defender of parliamentary democracy, the Right Honourable John George Diefenbaker. Today we find ourselves called upon to once again stand in support of this great institution, to once again stand for the right of opposition parliamentarians to hold this government to account. Now, for many Canadians, they may not be closely following the business of supply. They may not closely follow the allotted days or the opposition days that are often called in Parliament. But these days in which the agenda of this House falls to the opposition parties, are absolutely essential to our great parliamentary democracy. And we as an opposition, both as the official opposition and the other opposition parties, have the right to bring forward matters that we feel are important to our constituents and are important to all Canadians. In fact, if I could quote from Beauchene's Parliamentary Rules and Forms, 6th edition, it states the opposition prerogative is very broad in the use of the allotted day and ought not to be interfered with except in the clearest and most certain parliamentary grounds. So, Madam Speaker, we brought forward this Opposition Day motion on this day for very important reasons. Because this Liberal government decided to punish the official opposition by giving us a short parliamentary day. A short day where only two full speaking slots would be allocated to the opposition parties. This Liberal government seems to have forgotten that they are among the weakest governing mandate in Canadian history. This Liberal government forgets that they actually lost the popular vote in the last election, and Canadians saw fit to return them with a minority of seats in this place. Boston Gagnon states this at page 855. The setting aside of a specified number of sitting days on which the opposition chooses the subject of debate derives from the tradition which holds that Parliament does not grant supply until the opposition has had an opportunity to demonstrate why it should be refused. In other words, Madam Speaker, before we as the opposition can consent to the continued funding of this government, we must and we will have the opportunity to raise our concerns in this place. We will not be silenced. We will not accept that the government and only the government has a legitimate voice in this place. I would remind members of the Liberal Party that they are first and foremost a member of the legislative branch of government. Those who do not sit in cabinet are not members of the executive branch. They are parliamentarians and parliamentarians first and foremost. And they too should be concerned that the executive branch of government are the ones who are trying to control the debate of this very place. And I ought not to need to remind this government of their legislative record, their mismanagement of House time in the previous Parliament. At the time of dissolution, they had left at least 17 government bills lying on the order paper. This is in spite of the fact that they used time allocation on dozens of occasions. 13 motions on top of that for closure, and 40 motions to proceed to orders of the day, thereby bypassing the opportunity for opposition MPs to move concurrence motions or to table petitions on behalf of the constituents in each of our ridings, in all 338 ridings across this country. Madam Speaker, today's debate is about returning this House to the people, to give the official opposition, the Bloc Québécois, and the New Democratic Party each one additional opposition day during this supply period, to give each of these parties the opportunity to raise the issues before granting supply to this Liberal government. And I don't need to remind this House either about the disregard we've seen in the past by this Liberal Party to this institution. In the previous Parliament, one of their very first bills, Bill C-14, the Medical Assistance in Dying Act, it was found that they contravened the rights and privileges of this House by leaking the contents to the press, to the media, before it was tabled for all parliamentarians to see. And Madam Speaker, old habits die hard, because it appears they did that once again this time with Bill C-7, their amendments to medical assistance in dying. And Madam Speaker, we don't need to remind this government either about the impacts that they bring upon themselves when they attempt to use draconian measures to shut down debate in this House. We all remember Motion 6, where the government tried to unilaterally take control of every mechanism for debate in this House. And we don't need to remind this Liberal government of the standing order standoff, where they tried to diminish the opportunity for the opposition to hold the government to account, when they tried to unilaterally change the rules of this House. And it fell to us as the official opposition, and at the time, the third party, the New Democrats, to ensure that we were that line of defense, that we were that thin line of the wedge to prevent this Liberal government. And in fact, Madam Speaker, in the previous Parliament, during a debate in this very House on a question of privilege, one of the most significant matters that this House can be seized with, a Liberal member of Parliament, the member from Brossard-Saint-Lambert, stood in this House and killed that debate by moving to orders of the day. It seems like a procedural measure, but by moving to orders of the day on a question of privilege, it kills that debate. But Madam Speaker, our Parliament is stronger than any one Liberal member of Parliament. And at that time, the Speaker saw fit to return that question of privilege to this House so that Parliament could have its voices heard on that question of privilege. But we see this time and time again with this Liberal government. Every opportunity they have to do the right thing, they go the opposite direction. And that brings us to the events that we've seen just in the last couple of weeks. NAFTA, the new NAFTA. It's not a great deal. It's not the worst deal. It's somewhere in between. But we are the party of free trade, and we support the implementation of the new NAFTA despite its imperfections. But to hear the Deputy Prime Minister state publicly and in this place that we as the official opposition, we as the Conservative Party, was somehow trying to delay the new NAFTA, it's an insult to this opposition, and it's an insult to this House of Commons. And in fact, just yesterday, my colleague, the opposition House Leader, gave these Liberals an opportunity to right their wrong. She gave them an opportunity in this very place to bring forward NAFTA today, so that we could be standing here today debating NAFTA, so that I could raise the concerns of the people of Perth Wellington, the farmers, the manufacturers, the individuals who have concerns with this bill. But no, Madam Speaker, the Liberal didn't budge. In fact, speaking for the government, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader said no. No, the government would not be willing to bring NAFTA forward. Madam Speaker, that is unacceptable. So, Madam Speaker, we stand here today debating this opposition motion, a motion that gives the rights and the responsibilities of this House back to all of its members. I encourage all members to stand for their parliamentary privilege, to stand for democracy, and vote in favour of this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.